So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our coffee morning. For today, we have Dr. Cathy Murphy, who is a senior research fellow. She is a registered nurse and is also a researcher working on bladder and bowel management, in particular incontinence. So she will be talking about the work that her group at the University of Southampton plans to undertake. So without further ado, Cathy, floor is yours.
Morning, everybody. Hi, hello. Thanks very much for having me here today, and it's really great to have the opportunity to talk to you about our work. I'm going to share my screen and share the presentation. Oh, I've got a thing coming up saying host disabled participant screen sharing.
Apologies about that. It should work now. Oh, yeah, should work now.
Yeah. Okay, lovely. So if I put that on presentation, slideshow, can you see that? Yeah, hopefully everybody can see that. So I can't see you now. I always find this really funny with Zoom. So I can see my slides. I can't see anybody else. But anyway, so I shall carry on. But just to say, please do stop.
Sorry, Cathy, if you want, I can share your slides because you did send me your slides.
Can you not see my slides?
No.
Oh.
I can share. And
yeah, if you could share, then that would be great. And I'll try and.
There you go. Can everyone see the slides?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay. I'm not quite sure. Okay, I'll try that. Right. So I'll just ask you to forward them then, Mike, when I'm ready to go. Okay, so I'll make a start anyway. So as Mike said, I'm part of the Bladder and Bowel Management Research Group at the University of Southampton. We're in the School of Health Sciences. And our focus in that group is on incontinence, but it's very specifically on living with long-term incontinence and how to help people with that. So we're not so involved in preventing incontinence or treating incontinence, although obviously those things are very important, but we're more about living with incontinence. And our group is led by Professor Mandy Fader, who is a professor of continence technology, and I believe the only professor of continence technology in the world. And I'm going to talk today about what our group is currently doing and our current interests. And then I'm going to go on to what we want to expand into in the future. And that's what I kind of want to get your feedback on today, if I can. So there's a specific project funding application that we're doing at the moment that I'd like to get a little bit of comments on, if I can. But also there's just a general approach to how we're going to expand our work over the coming years that it would be great to have any comments on. Please do stop me at any point if there's any questions throughout the presentation. So if I can go on to the next slide, please, Mike. So just to start off, so who are we talking about here? Who are these people that we're talking about who are living with long-term incontinence? So it's important to say that anybody who can be treated for incontinence should be. The underlying problems, where at all possible, should be assessed and treated. But that's not possible for a lot of people who do have incontinence. So we're talking about people who are waiting for treatment or waiting for that treatment to take effect, who don't have any treatment options, perhaps, that don't want the treatment options on offer, or for whom the treatment doesn't work fully. It's really difficult to know the numbers that we're talking about because, as we'll come on to later, there's obviously a big stigma around incontinence, and an awful lot of people live with incontinence before they seek any help. So the recent or fairly recent numbers have sort of said between 5 and 7 million people in the UK are living with some kind of urinary incontinence. So it is a huge number of people. The sort of people that we're mainly focusing on are the people with the moderate to higher end of incontinence where the problem really is affecting their day-to-day lives. So this is a really wide range of people. It could be people who have functional problems in one way or another. So whether that's neurological, whether that's for other reasons, whether it's due to frailty, people who can't reach the loo in time, people who perhaps have dementia and don't necessarily recognize the sensations of needing to go to the toilet. We're less focused on perhaps the people you see in the more recent tenor adverts on television who have perhaps the lighter end of stress incontinence, that kind of thing. It is more focusing on the people who are affected in their day-to-day lives by this. I'm not saying light incontinence is not a problem, not at all, but we are more focused at the heavy end. And as well as the actual person who's experiencing the incontinence, we're also very much focused on carers, family and friend carers who are supporting people in their day-to-day lives living with incontinence. So if I can go on to the next slide, please, Mike. So the impacts of living with long-term incontinence, it probably doesn't take a lot of imagination to think what this could be on people's lives if they can't control their bladder or their bowel or both. So there's the physical impact, there's the potential for infection, there's damage to skin, there's the psychological impact, which is huge. The uncertainty involved in, am I going to have leakage, am I not going to have leakage? And the risk management and the anxiety and depression that can be caused by incontinence is something that comes across really strongly in the qualitative work in this area, and massively impacts on people's lives. The social impact, so people not being able to go out and continue with their normal daily activities, whether that be sports or going to cafes or whatever, but also in some cases people not wanting other people to come into their homes. So because they're concerned about smell or concerned about the embarrassment associated with leakage. And so it really can shrink down people's worlds very considerably. And there's also the burden of leakage in terms of the house. So damaged carpets, damaged furniture, mattresses, and so on. And also the economic burden of living with incontinence as well. Some of the, we're going to talk about this a bit more in a minute, but some of the products that people use, a lot of them are bought themselves. They're not provided by the NHS or local authorities or anything. A lot of people buy their own products to manage. And they're also dealing with things like the cost of extra care, replacing clothing, replacing carpets, and so on, from the damage that can be caused to the home by incontinence. Next slide, please, Mike. So what are we doing? What are we trying to do about this at the moment? Our current projects at the moment are largely focused on continence technologies. So devices and products used to contain leakage. So those are mostly catheters and also absorbent products, pads and things that people wear to contain the leakage. So we've got a couple of multi-center trials going on one on a novel urinary catheter. And the urinary catheters have a huge number of problems with them. And we're testing out in a big NIHR-funded trial. We're just about to start testing out a new design of catheter that's designed to try and reduce infections and harms associated with those devices. We're also at the moment recruiting for a trial to reuse intermittent catheters. Intermittent catheters are catheters that are put in to drain the bladder and then removed straight away, rather than indwelling catheters, which you put in and might leave there for weeks at a time. Intermittents are in, drain the bladder and take them out again. And at the moment, the large majority of people use single-use intermittent catheters. So you use it and then you throw it away. And we're looking at the potential for using the catheter, cleaning it, and then perhaps reusing it for a week. And that reduces the costs. It also reduces the plastic use and so on. And with the trial is seeing, does that impact on urinary tract infection at all? And also people's quality of life with using the device. We've got a first in human trial of a catheter valve that's just about to start. We're also looking at developing new devices. We're looking at developing a new penile compression device for men with urinary incontinence, and we're also looking at a nighttime boxer for men with heavy leakage at night to use. So those projects are underway. At the moment, we're working with some manufacturers on those. We've also this year been doing a very interesting study with the assistive technology teams of the World Health Organization, looking at, it's a qualitative study looking at the use of washable absorbent products. So these are products that can be used, and like the old style babies' nappies, the terry toweling type nappies, they're used and washed and reused. And we're looking at the use of those in India, Papua New Guinea and Romania. That's a really interesting project, because at the moment, a lot of people in some parts of those countries, particularly in the rural parts of those countries, are coping with incontinence using paper or rags. And we're seeing if products can be provided, especially design products can be designed to, can be provided to them in a sustainable way to those populations to help manage on a day-to-day basis. And then lastly on this list, I'm undertaking a project at the moment funded by the Alzheimer's Society, looking at dementia and incontinence for people living at home. And we're looking at the problems that people face and looking at potential solutions, particularly around providing better information to people on how to cope. So next slide, please, Mike. So this is one of our main outputs is the Continence Product Advisor website, which is edited by our research group at the University of Southampton. And it's kind of owned by the International Continence Society, and it's based on an evidence-based systematic review of continence products. And it's there to provide advice for professionals, but also people and carers living with incontinence on the different types of products and devices that are available. And it's one of our key ways of getting our findings out to people. And it's had over 1 million hits now, and is recommended by the NHS, which is great. Next one, please, Mike. So coming on to what I wanted to talk to you mostly about today is that we're looking in the coming years to expand on our work on continence technologies and look at other ways we can support people who are trying to achieve social continence. And social continence is where people are living with incontinence, so they have bladder or bowel leakage or both. But social continence is where that is sufficiently contained that you can get on with your day-to-day life as far as possible. So it's contained so that you can still go out and about, and other people don't necessarily know that you're incontinent, and you can continue and maintain quality of life as far as possible whilst living with the problem. And we've identified 3 key areas that are important to obtaining and maintaining social continence. The first one is at the top is assistive technologies, and that's kind of where we are at the moment. And that's something that absolutely needs to continue, because there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done in that area to improve what we know about what's available, and also things like sustainability and accessibility to products as well. And then there's the day-to-day practicalities, which are hugely important and haven't really been studied. And so for one example of this is looking at carer workload, which we know incontinence can lead to unwanted admission into residential care, where care breaks down at home. And the care workload of looking after somebody with moderate to heavy incontinence can be huge. But there's been very, very little work in how to support the day-to-day practicalities of caring for somebody in that situation. You can think of a common scenario when you've got an older person who's caring for another older person, perhaps their spouse. And the sheer physical workload of that can be enormous, and whether there are ways that can be supported. And there are options available from occupational therapy and so on for helping with moving and handling of people, but there's probably room for a lot of improvement there. And then the third area we're looking at is managing negative emotions. Something that comes across really strongly in qualitative work in this area is just how distressing this problem is for people. So physically, it might not cause you that much harm, but emotionally, it's incredibly, or can be incredibly damaging for many people. There's the stigma involved, which leads to social isolation and shame. For carers, they admit to feeling disgust. Both the person experiencing the incontinence and carers can feel huge anxiety about the uncertainty of never knowing when an accident is going to happen, and when this incontinence will be revealed to other people, which is the underlying huge fear. So if I can just go on to the next slide. So following on from that, we've got a current funding application that we're just developing. The NIHR Health and Technology Assessment Programme have just put out a commission call for health and social care outcome cost effectiveness of assistive technologies. And we're putting in an application to look at a really wide range of continence technologies to map them with incontinence problems in phase 1, and then in phase 2 to undertake a systematic review and synthesis of the evidence on these technologies, because that's not available at the moment. Sorry, my phone's just ringing. I'll just switch that off. It's bad timing. Sorry about that. So we think that'll be a very useful piece of work to undertake. And because from that, we'll end up hopefully with a report. If we get that funding, we'd end up with a report saying, okay, there's evidence to support these particular technologies. There's limited evidence to support these, and there's none but on these technologies, but there's theoretical, there's theory perhaps to support different products. And that would be a starting point to what we need to do next, really, to develop a proper evidence base for the provision of these products. One of the key complications with these products is that some are provided by the NHS, such as urinary catheters, and some absorbent products. Some of these products are provided by social care, for example, commodes, handheld urinals, things like that. But an awful lot of these products are bought by the people experiencing the problems themselves. And so understanding what the evidence is behind these means that people can, that authorities and individuals themselves can then start to make spending decisions on what's worthwhile to buy and what isn't. So that's something that we're undertaking at the moment. And if I can just move on to the next one, Mike, please. So other things that we're thinking about, and I'd really like to get your feedback on this, stigma reduction interventions. In other areas of healthcare, for example, in mental health, in HIV and AIDS, epilepsy, leprosy, there's a range of diseases where there is a high level of stigma. There's been quite a lot of work in stigma reduction interventions, which are often, they're aimed at the individual to try and help them to cope with the stigma that's caused by their disease. And if they can overcome the stigma or learn to manage the stigma the theory is that you can improve quality of life by helping people to carry on with their lives on a day-to-day basis. But there hasn't been anything along these lines for incontinence, which is quite surprising because the stigma associated with incontinence is huge. So we're thinking about ways that we could develop an intervention in that area. Another area is information for managing on a day-to-day level with people, for people with incontinence and for their carers, on how to cope with containing leakage, how to cope with accidents when uncontained leakage when it does happen, even very straightforward things like how to clean furnishings and so on. What's the best way to clean a mattress, for example, or to avoid a mattress getting damaged in the first place. So quite basic day-to-day things, but absolutely fundamental to people's quality of life. And then finally, also really importantly, carer support interventions. How to help carers to continue caring if that's what they want to do, how to help them cope with that workload of incontinence. So the last slide. Thanks very much for listening to this very quick run through of what we're doing. So if anybody has any feedback on our plans for how we'd like to expand our programme of work, that would be fantastic. A specific area that we're always interested in is the challenges with recruitment in this area. It's really quite hard sometimes to get people to come forward, particularly to be involved in trials of new products and things like that. There is that stigma associated with incontinence, and not everybody wants to be part of research, understandably. We have a big problem with getting ethnic minorities involved in particular. And if anybody's interested in the longer term in being involved in this sort of expanding program of work, we'd be really, really interested to hear from you as well. So that's me done on my quick tour of what we're doing. So I don't know if you want to finish the